Yeah. As I got another rhyme, another rhythm for y'all to listen. I'm never quitting on my mission. I'ma roll with what I'm giving. Got some ambition, this new edition, filling positions. Looking at the void in myself and feeling what's missing. Better watch the way you going, better go in the right direction. In the moment you stressing, but you gon' be counting blessings. And I know that for certain. Keep on working, open curtains, haters swerving, cause they ain't ready for your final version. I'm never gonna give up, fall down.
You're listening to the Todd Ficklin Show on WNHH LP 103.5 FM, your home for community radio.
Good morning, everyone. And Harry, thanks for lifting up Zach Carroll. And that's that music you hear is a creation and a artistic endeavor of a gentleman by the name of Jack Carroll. And Zach Carter is his stage name. So kind of go to iTunes or SoundCloud and plug in ZACH Carter, Zach Carter. I met him I was teaching a semester at Gateway Community College and on public speaking, and part of Zach's homework assignment was to kind of either write or give a presentation. This was his presentation, and I've just played it for the last year and a half, and I know I owe him kind of residuals or something here because I've been exploiting, but I want to kind of share his talent. And in terms of sharing talents and nurturing our talents as a society, as a civilization, as a species, we don't want to waste our talents. We don't want to waste our intellectual capacity, our social capacity, our economic capacity. And we're going to talk a little bit about how perhaps this looming issue of decriminalization of the availability of marijuana, either for medical purposes and or for leisure time purposes, what does that indicate in terms of where society is going? Does it have a medical impact? Does it have an economic impact? Is it basically a good thing? Is it a good thing or not? We know about prohibition. We know about the I'll tease people with something called the Opium Wars, and kind of Google the Opium Wars. There are actually two of them between Britain and kind of opening up new markets in Asia. So there's ways that politics and profits and pharmacology and new inventions and even, if I dare say, mind control has kind of kicked in. And we have two folks who not necessarily help me solve those problems today. We have Pastor Todd Foster and Pastor Abraham Hernandez. We're not going to solve those big macro issues, but we are going to talk about the marijuana situation. We know that Massachusetts, it's available from a recreational standpoint. We know that in New York State, it's kind of kicking in terms of various pieces of legislation that have been introduced already. And certainly this upcoming legislative season here in Connecticut, if you don't know who your state representative is or who your state senator is, kind of pay attention. And I'll kind of post that information on the Facebook page as well. But Pastor Todd Foster and Pastor Abraham Hernandez are here to kind of talk about why they have, quite frankly, at this stage in their life, invested their time and energy in this issue and how they see it in terms of their religious mandate, in terms of their perception of community. Both these gentlemen have been involved, really embedded in kind of the social issues, the political issues, the economic issues, and the religious issues here in the New Haven area for some time. And so Pastor Todd and Pastor Abraham, welcome to the Tom Ficklin Show.
Great to be here.
Good to see you. So we have like 43 minutes or so now to really to dive in about, as I say, one perhaps opening statement on your parts could be why this time in let's say, as I say 2018, but it's 2019 now. But why in this, as we close in on the first 2 decades of this century, why something like this is now perhaps really important in terms of your journey and the investment of your energy. I'll start off perhaps, Pastor Todd, with you.
Sure. Well, you already alluded to the reality that this wave is upon us. I had this vision of being at the beach and a wave coming. Thinking of that scene, a horrific scene in Indonesia. The band was playing, and unsuspected, a wave came upon them and destroyed lives. It was a horrendous scene to behold, and I just see similar an analogy to be made there of a wave that's coming. As you alluded, there are 10 states where marijuana is fully legal right now. Washington D.C. plus Washington D.C. And it's coming, as you said. Massachusetts is already there. New York is right at the cusp. So it's undeniable that something is coming upon us. When you know that a wave is coming, you have a couple of choices. One is you can stand there and let it fall atop you and be crushed under it and pulled out in the undertow. You can also dive into it, and dive into it maybe oppose it or dive into it analytically and find out, what are we really talking about here? What are the ramifications of it? So I'm in the dive into it camp right now. It's let's dive into it and find out what we're really talking about before, and that's the key term, before we make any radical changes. Or third option is we can hop on our boogie boards and just go with the wave, So there are a lot of people hopping on the boogie boards right now and just going with the wave. If I told my mother I'm going to do something because everybody else is doing it, well, that would not fly whatsoever. Yet I feel like there's a lot of people of that mindset. Everybody else is doing it, so why shouldn't Connecticut also do it? But if we were to take a careful look, if we were to dive into it and really look at the ramifications and the gamble that we're taking concerning our young people in particular and future generations, I would say it ought to govern, it ought to inform whatever decisions are made. So that's where I'm at in a nutshell. Let's dive into this before changes are made.
And Pastor Abraham Hernandez, kind of share with us as well about your your commitment, why you're here this morning, why it's important to you to get up and rebel rouse with Pastor Todd and I.
Well, having been born and raised in New Haven, I do recall when I was a child and there was a corner store about half a block from my house. And my siblings and I had some change that we had in our little change box. And we went to the store, came back home, and we had our little candy cigarettes. And for the first time, we saw my mom scold us for eating candy. Even though when it was excessive, there were times in which she would have to say, okay, you need to hold it back. But seeing what, and I thank God for my mom at that time, who told us this is just a place that you don't want to go to. And she sat down with us, explained to us the implications, and I said, wow, this is something that will do harm to me. And to see, when we fast forward, we see the Say No to Drugs campaign and what it did to our inner cities and to our communities of color. I find that we're before a precipice once again. We're at a crossroads here in this country where our inner cities children will be having to face decisions which can lead them in total opposite directions. And that is concerning, as Pastor Todd said. It seems to be the thing. And we just feel that it has to be something that we have to really think through. And not just look at one face of the coin, but look at both sides.
And you referenced that your mom was concerned about even candy cigarettes might lead to you being predisposed to smoke, to actually smoking.
Correct, precisely. And that was a concern.
Which is a point to be made. Part of the dilemma that we see coming is the normalization and commercialization of marijuana. Once you get big tobacco and big alcohol into the picture, I don't care if that's the intention or not, they are chomping at the bit to get in their piece of the pie on this. Big alcohol, they're the ones who have put a liquor store on every corner, and they're not thinking twice about it. It's revenue streams for them. Big tobacco, Marlboro invested $1.8 billion in a marijuana company already. Now, why would Big Tobacco invest $1.8 billion unless they intended to get many more $1 billion back? It's them that I fear more than anything. If they are unharnessed, if they are unleashed into the community to reap their dollars, we've seen what they've done to the community. We've seen Joe Camel, that reference to candy cigarettes, for example. That was collusion back in the day. They gave permission to confectionery companies to make candy cigarettes. Why? Because it promoted their brands and because it birthed a new generation of cigarette smokers. So put it in their minds at an early age that smoking is a natural thing. By the way, they're the ones who told us that 9 out of 10 doctors recommend that cigarettes are healthy. So that big companies often don't have a moral conscience unless they are provoked to do so, unless they are challenged, unless we say, wait a minute, that Joe Camel, who are you appealing to there? What are you doing? Until somebody says something, they're going to do what they're going to do. It's about revenue to them.
Again, you're listening to the Tom Ficklin Show, and Pastor Todd Foster is here, and Pastor Abraham Hernandez is here also. Gentlemen, talk to me about you guys. The reason you're on the show, from my standpoint, you're just not sharing information, but you've been involved with some proactive engagement and activities and and rallying people and communicating with people and kind of mapping out various marketing and political civic strategies for folks to get involved. I guess not for them not to just take your words, although your words are important and I'm sure relevant, but how folks can also explore what their own commitment, their own biases, their own beliefs, their own impact on their families. You've been involved with activities about how people can get engaged. I referenced, for example, you had a meeting with, I believe, some state reps and state senators and some of the clergy association recently.
Actually, it was several of us. It wasn't just me. Pastor Abraham was the key proponent and organizer in that effort. And we gathered the legislators there. I think one thing that came out of that meeting is that our legislators are pretty well determined to move forward in the direction of legalization. I think they were doing us a favor in their mind to listen to us, but at least they're listening. At least we have an opportunity, and that's what we want. There is another side to be presented. We want an opportunity to present that side, and we hope that others will listen as well. I felt like it was a productive meeting. It does you no good to sit in a room with people who all agree with you. So we did not agree in that forum, but at least we heard each other. And I heard some common ground too. Representative Candelaria, for example, has grave concerns about, he's a proponent of legalization, but he's saying that the wording should be crafted in such a way that our children and our youth are protected, other concerns about the community. I was glad to hear that. If it goes that way, at least somebody is thinking beyond revenue stream. What is this going to do in our communities, and what needs to be done in the crafting of language to make sure that we've considered those things?
Yeah, I've had the opportunity to meet with clergy from throughout the state these last few weeks, and when we've asked them what's your take on this effort, they've stated that they were not aware as to the impact, as to the ramifications that this legislation would have in our inner cities, in our children, because since medical marijuana was passed in Connecticut, I want to say 2013-14, folks have taken to it that, well, this is okay. Others feel that, well, this is going to pass regardless. But when we say, do you think it's worth it for us to say, tell our legislators, let's take the time out. Let's analyze all the after effects, the aftershocks of this coming to pass in Connecticut, based on experiences and scientific evidence and data from other states once they did so and approved in their states. And clergy say, you know what, then we need to raise our voices. Our concern, at least my concern particularly, is that it seems like there's the press has done its job to cover it, but it seems like there's just one voice that's being heard, and there's not the voice that we consider the voice of reasoning that can say, let's dive into it, per what Pastor Todd has said. Let's look a little deeper into the issue.
So lobbyists have been after this thing for a number of years. Yes. I think we're a little slow in response, but it's time to be a voice, and the clock is ticking. So we don't have a lot of time to get vocal. So here we are.
So what are some tactics or strategies or efforts? Are you taking buses up to Hartford? Are you? I know you might have is there a petition? Are you doing marketing, or what's the way of kind of getting the word out?
Well, actually,
rallying people.
Reverend Hernandez talk about January 23rd. But meanwhile, though, there is a petition that is out, and you can find that at. Can we attach that?
Absolutely,
okay,
absolutely.
We'll do that. There's a link to the petition. There's a hard copy petition as well. Now is the time to be heard. So we want to get our numbers together before January 23rd. So tell us about that.
Well, yes, on the 23rd, we're going to hold a press conference and somewhat of a briefing forum where we can share. We're talking about those from the medical field, from substance abuse professionals, data, information that our legislators as well as the public can somewhat receive firsthand before we move on. So in that, we're hoping that our legislators can attend. We've been holding some meetings with legislators in different cities. At least the clergy are taking initiative to work with other stakeholders. We were in New Britain this last Thursday, and the school superintendent with, I believe, a sergeant from the police department was there, and they were clergy. We invited a state representative, but he was caught up in committee meetings up in Hartford, and we had to excuse him. But when we heard the school superintendent and the sergeant from the police department share with the clergy what they're seeing, what they've been coping with, especially with this vaping issue, when we know that there's 4 million students in our schools, and I thought it was high school, and the school superintendent corrected me. He says, "No, Reverend, this is happening in our middle schools."
Yes, it's something that brings concern. Just as an aside, Congressperson DeLauro was at one of our middle schools last week,
correct,
speaking to students just on this issue, trying to warn them about what might be happening. Go ahead.
Yeah. So when we heard from the school superintendent, there was about 30, 40 leaders and clergy and other stakeholders there that when she was speaking, you saw the body languages of each of us in that room move in a sense of feeling uncomfortable and say, well, this is shocking. This is more than meets the eyes. So what we believe is that our community, as well as legislators, we need to learn more. And Pastor Todd was gracious enough to prepare some questions that I believe go aligned with the questions we've heard from people in the state of Connecticut.
So, but again, let's go back to January 23rd. I mean, that's around the corner.
Yes.
Has a location been identified yet?
That's going to be at the state LOB. Okay. I believe it's room 1A from 10 to 12 p.m. There's going to be we're going to professionals and so on, as I said, doctors, treatment directors, and a period for the press to also ask questions.
Yeah, please share that with us so we can get that word out.
We'll certainly do that.
Talk to me. I mean, this is because I keep on hearing the theme that this is just not. We're talking about generational health.
Exactly.
From what I hear.
So let me give you some.
And we know about the war on crime and the impacts of that. We know about when we try to lock people up for crack, and now we hear that so many of us were sentenced for marijuana. Now it's going to be legal. So I hear the political policy, the governmental policy, not being in our economic policy, not being in our best interest.
That's a good point that you raised. The whole disparate treatment in terms of arrest, in terms of the criminal justice system. There has been a disparity, and it does need to be addressed. I want to go on record as saying I see that problem. It is a real problem, and it needs to be addressed one way or another. I think that we're going too far when we say, well, we'll legalize everything now. The reality is that the problem can be fixed or at least addressed through decriminalization. And the issue of racial disparity in criminal justice is so much deeper than just legalizing marijuana. It's been shown that even after marijuana has been decriminalized or legalized, the disparities still exist.
We're still arrested at a higher rate.
Still arrested at a higher rate. I think you posted something about Baltimore, for example. Now, Baltimore has decriminalized, but Baltimore has some other issues. Baltimore, for example, is a very segregated town. There are pockets of communities of color throughout. It's wider than it used to be back in the day, but it's still inherently a town, a city that is not really well integrated. When the police are going after criminals, they're going into the high crime, quote unquote, areas, and where are they going to go? So there's a lot of reasons why the arrest records are higher in the African American community. The same is true in New Haven, for example. The state of Connecticut decriminalized quite some time ago, but you will find, I think, African Americans are 34%, something like that, of the city of New Haven, but the arrests or citations, are now 60-something percent. So we're finding the same thing here. The answer is not in legalizing marijuana. there are bigger problems that need to be addressed. In fact, I will go so far as to say that those who have taken up that banner of let's legalize because of the disparity are actually doing the community a disservice because of the deeper issues, because of the long-term issues, because of the risk to our children, because of the risk to our youth, that long-term you're doing more harm than good. I think you're being bamboozled, as a matter of fact, if you buy into the lie that the answer is legalization. I just want to read some information about the impact on youth and why we're concerned. Now, this is out of Colorado is kind of the grandfather of all of this, but it's a very young grandfather because they legalized in 2014, January of 2014, but they're already finding out information that is of great concern. They're saying weekly marijuana use by adolescents is associated with impaired learning, memory, math, and reading, even 28 days after last use. Weekly use is also associated with failure to graduate from high school and failure to attain a college degree. Adolescents and young adults who use marijuana are more likely to experience psychotic symptoms as adults, such as hallucinations, paranoia, delusional beliefs, and feeling emotionally unresponsive. Daily or near daily use is associated with developing a psychotic disorder such as schizophrenia in adulthood. So this is the future that we're talking about. And somebody will say, well, we're not legalizing it for young people. Young people will be affected, and young people are being affected. That's the problem. Once we paint the picture that this is cool now, this is normalized, anybody can do it, that it's part of the social fabric now. Once we do that and give carte blanche, freedom and liberty to without regret to openly smoke marijuana, they will. Now, the reality is that in terms of full disclosure, that the rate of use among youth in Colorado, for example, has only slightly gone up. That's actually encouraging to me that it's only slightly gone up slightly. But the concerning factor to me is that those who are already in the habit of using in their teen years, that their use has gone significantly up. So once they were given carte blanche, go ahead, this is good now, their use, those who are already using, has gone way up. And now we're looking at these factors that I just read about as being serious considerations for anything that we do. We are carving the way for our future. And it does beg the question, what kind of world do we want to live in?
And Abraham, I heard you mention, and correct me if I'm wrong, but at the press conference, you'll have some medical experts and people that have been involved with research.
Yes. We're looking to have them there because data that we've looked at from the country is quite concerning, and we don't want to. I had a sister who unfortunately she fell prey at the drugs, and she thank God she's back up on her feet. She's back in church and so on. But she was about 20 years in drugs, and I just asked her. I said, Martha, how did you start? She said, I started smoking weed. And when you hear that some say that it's not a gateway drug, it's somewhat laughable to me because I've spoken to about 20 believers, in conversations who told me that they were once heroin, cocaine, whatever it may be. And I said, how do you start? And they have all told me the exact question or response. And to see the data that 52% of teens get their marijuana for free. Just mentioned the 4 million who are vaping, and the problem with Juuls in middle school and schools and so on. Just concerns me. The data, going to the date of graduation, that 60% of kids who use marijuana regularly do not graduate high school. Should raise an alarm and should give us a reason for concern.
As you know, I run a mentoring program here too, the Gang of Dads.
Yeah, Gang of Dads.
And it's alarming to me. Now, I won't say most of them, but I've had a few of them come through that it is quite clear that they are heavily engaged in marijuana use. And it disturbs me what they're doing to the future. Whatever is done concerning marijuana laws, part of it, if they do go to legalization, you better be telling me what you're going to do to educate our young people. You better be, if you're going to go that way and say it's okay now, you better be alerting young people to the harm, and very stringently. And you better be coming down hard on anyone who is violating or encouraging our young people to go in that direction. So that's got to be part of the picture too.
And I asked the school superintendent from New Britain, what's your take? What's your response to someone who states, if we legalize marijuana in Connecticut, we're going to take of those funds for preventive care and education for kids in schools? What's your response? And she says, I don't want one penny. All I want is a sound mind and our kids open with great cognitive skills and the ability to learn. And I think that's just the gist of it. I remember reading an article in Colorado as the school superintendent who stated, we were promised funds for schools for marijuana, and the only thing I've received in my school is more marijuana.
So the tax revenue is not going back to the schools in Colorado, at least.
Well, at least his response was if anything we received, or maybe they had, but I think it was making reference to it's more what the amount of marijuana infiltrating the schools has far outweighed what we're receiving from the state government.
Okay.
Another aspect of the whole situation is the impact on public safety, the impact on driving. Insurance companies are dreading this. They are seeing payouts. That's it. And what does that tell you? That means people are going to get hurt and people are going to die as a result of
good point.
More marijuana on the highways. Do we need another distraction? I mean, we've got people texting, we've got people drinking, and we're going to add to that mix people drinking and texting and using marijuana. We better stay home if that's the case. The highways become a very dangerous place.
And I have a dear friend who has an insurance company in Branford, and I stopped by her office this last week just to say hi, and she said, "What are you up to?" And I said, "Well, the concern about marijuana and so on." She says, "You know what, Pastor, we're having a hard time trying to get life insurance policies for folks nowadays because once they take a urine sample and they find that there's trace of marijuana, then the price for life insurance is skyrocketing because insurance companies just don't want to insure." So the economic impact, and I heard from someone recently, we don't have scientific data to corroborate it, but saying, there are places where they can't find roofers,
right?
Because they're concerned to have someone who's stoned on a roof. It's going to put their liability insurance at a high risk, and forklift drivers and truck drivers. So this is the implications are many if this comes to pass, and these are the reasons why Pastor Todd, when God, I say God used them to draft these 12 questions, and I methodically went through each and every one of them. I said, wow, these are questions that our state legislators need to answer. And my response to that is, if they answer those 12 questions satisfactorily with some scientific evidence and so on, then vote yes. But our concerns are that there are legitimate, there's legitimate data and evidence, scientific evidence that says, you know what, for these questions, there still remain a lot of question marks and concerns that should have us take a step back for a moment and take a time out.
So just to name a few of the questions, there's 12 of them. Maybe we can publish this too.
Absolutely.
But, what will be the impact on children as a result of the prevalence of edibles, marijuana-laced candies, and other foods in households? What will be done? This is what I'm asking the legislators to answer before they make any changes. What will be done to protect them in terms of labeling, child-proof packaging, and education? What will be done to discourage youth from indulging once marijuana is normalized and commercialized? What have been the consequences to those who have become heavy users in their teen years? Will legalization encourage or discourage youth, their use? What will be the impact to employers in terms of absenteeism, productivity, and workplace safety as a result of normalization and commercialization of marijuana through legalization for recreational purposes? So there's 12 categories. We have data that suggests that each of these is a problem area, that it brings up concerns. The data shows that it does. When you bring up data and I've had this happen a few times. Well, that's people trying to make up numbers to prove their points, and there's numbers on the other side to say just the opposite. Well, show me that. I'm all for. I'm not into. I call it Trumpinocchio alternative facts. I want to know the truth, and I want to deal on the basis of truth. I'm not trying to drive a point home based on made-up statistic. What is the reality? And don't our legislators have an obligation to find that out? If they don't believe my numbers, then get me some numbers that show me something else. And if you can do that and answer these questions satisfactorily, well, you do what you're going to do.
Again, you're listening to the Tom Ficklin Show, and really a pleasant, and I'll use the term pleasant. It's rich and it's sobering. And as we move to 2019 and think about now we're in January and New Year's resolutions, and everybody kind of comes off the holiday season, be it Three Kings or Kwanzaa or Christmas, and kind of thinking about this new year that we're all engaged in. What does it mean for how do we kind of contribute and invest in our futures and invest in our young people? And this topic is so apropos for us to have in January about what does the future mean and what is our role in it? I was chatting with Pastor Abraham Hernandez and Pastor Todd Foster before we came on air that these gentlemen could have retired 5 years ago and their legacy would still be profound. So I want to kind of come back again to Abraham. Why at this stage in your life, you're young, 47, right?
Yes.
40, yeah. Don't mind me. I mean, you mentioned Martha, your sister, and even that. If I can just digress, guys, for him to be comfortable in mentioning his sister's name on the air shows how this is really such a personal issue, and it's personal for all of us. We all know, as Pastor Todd was talking and as Abraham was talking, we know of folks that maybe are caught up in the drug world, caught up in the substance abuse world, caught up in. We haven't even talked about opioids. So there's just so much that can kind of be attractive and then / addictive, and that might and does impair our just survival, our growth, our harmony, our health as a community. So I forget what I was going to even ask you now, but
well, being part of the community of faith, I know from my dad being a pastor, and like you said, something that struck within our home. I find that clergy, our congregations are not filled, but we have significant amount of members who were ex-addicts. We were in Birchport early last week, I believe, and there was a gentleman that touched my heart when he says, at the age of 16, I was introduced to marijuana. I lost my wife, I lost my home, I lost my kids, I lost my job, I lost everything. And now it took me years for me to recover everything that I lost. That strikes a chord. I seen my dad. I saw my dad when I was younger. Put his pants down at 10, 11 o'clock at night when he had to go and work with a family in crisis.
Yeah.
And I just feel that this is a recipe for some type of disaster in our inner city with our kids, with the next generation. And that is really what has provoked me to respond to what I consider a clarion call, to say, if not for me, then think about the next generation that's coming behind us. So I just felt compelled. I didn't have anyone call me Pastor Todd. I was speaking to the Richard Furlow from the city council, and I was sharing with him my concern a few months ago. The last 2 years, I was at the state capitol testifying about this, and when Richard Furlow sent me the article, he said, Pastor Todd wrote an article. You might want to read this.
He did. He did. Well,
we've had some type of relationship throughout the years, and I said, Pastor Todd, I applaud you, because we know that, and I would say due to sometimes lack of information, Pastor Todd was putting himself out there.
Indeed, that's what. Yes, at risk,
right,
going against the wave,
right,
going against the momentum.
And I just reached out to Pastor Todd. And I said, Pastor Todd, I think that we both share this burden for kids or grandkids, and what keeps me engaged in this is to think that what are my kids, my grandkids, my great grandkids,
yes, the unborn,
going to ask me when they say, when this passed, where were you at, or what did you do? And for me to say, I just remained silent and said, well, it's going to pass anyway. It's happening in Massachusetts. It's happening in the States. I just said, I can't live with myself if that question is asked. And that would be my response, in which I just stayed idled on the sideline.
Yes. Yes.
So my turn.
Yes. Yes.
So my title is Pastor Emeritus, Church on the Rock.
All right.
Which is a euphemism for I need a job. I'm 63 years old. The Lord prompted me to turn over Church on the Rock to a young man who's doing a phenomenal job. I am cheerleader in chief.
Yes.
And applauding their success. They're continuing to do phenomenally well. They're doing better than ever. And that was a difficult thing. And in fact, I have a column to write for Faith Matters in the Register. I think I'm going to be talking about this transition.
Good.
It takes a level of faith to walk away from something that you've been engaged in for 27 years and know that you're going to be all right. I know that I'm going to be all right. And I also know that whatever I do, I'm going to be involved in helping people. I'm going to be involved in the community. I'm in some degree reinventing myself, and I know that the Lord will lead. This whole marijuana thing came up. One of the things I thought I'd do, I thought I'd start to do a little more writing. What am I going to write about? Well, I was feeling like I was getting one perspective on the marijuana issue, and it wasn't the whole perspective. So it became a personal interest to find out, what are some of the other factors that we're not hearing about? So I wrote the article that appeared in the Independent, got a call from Pastor Abraham, got a call from some other people. And before I knew it, I was in the middle of this thing. I wasn't planning on all of that. But
now you're on the show. Yeah.
Now I'm on the show. Yeah. Here we are. And we'll see where we go from here. My determination is to continue to make a difference and to continue to present truth. Whether the truth agrees with me or not, my pursuit is truth. It'll set you free, I hear. So in the name of liberty and true freedom, we need to deal with real truths. And that's what we're here to talk about. You don't have to agree with me, but let's be in that common pursuit of truth, and we'll all be better.
Again, you're listening to the Tom Ficklin Show. We're kind of winding down, gentlemen, and really a pleasure to have you. I'm gonna give you guys the last word. I just wanted to say that in some ways, I think we could be having this discussion in 1790 and 1890, 1990. There's some timeless themes here about society and actually also in terms of the agrarian nature of society. We think about marijuana as also one of the herbs, but also so many of our other pharmaceutical products are derived from some ancient things, and whether or not even all medications are good for you and side effects. So we have a lot of information as you keep on echoing about pharmacology and neurology and impact on people's brain and substance abuse. But we know that opioids we know that we can abuse many things. So there's a need for the medical establishment in general and our industries to kind of catch up with the people. I hear you talk about Pastor Todd and Pastor Hernandez, the people's interest versus the profit interest. And as you mentioned, Joe Camel, the campaigns that kind of sell cigarettes and liquor in our community, I want to kind of just close on that myself, that it's something to be aware of. We hear this term about not necessarily always repeating history, but at some point, some things are so glaringly obvious, but we still kind of fall in the pit, the pit of ignorance. And that comes back to your knowledge quest and your marketing quest. So as we conclude, kind of mention the upcoming legislative office building event that's open to the public, and share again the theme I really like about the knowledge quest and the petition although you didn't say this, but I'm assuming you might be organizing people to go up to Hartford and testify, and also you don't have to actually these days even physically. It's good to physically testify at the various hearings, but you can write and submit comments, etc. So let's kind of close in terms of the action steps that people can be involved with, either physically or through their friends or through their churches or through their neighborhoods or through their community organizations or directly contacting their state rep or their state senator.
Well, thank you, Tom, first of all, for this invitation. This next Wednesday at the State Legislative Office Building, Hartford, there will be a forum and press conference starting at 10 a.m. We encourage our community to attend. We're inviting our legislators, but there are ways in which we can get engaged. One is let's do our due diligence. Let's try and get the facts. As Pastor Todd said, if you are concerned, if you have been harmed, your family or some loved one has been touched by this, I think that merits our attention. And we do have a petition that some folks are signing out to clergy and community residents from New Haven and throughout the state to bring awareness to this. Public hearings are very critical. Yeah. I think that if I want to know more, I as a resident in the state, I can go and sit down at Hartford at public hearing and hear precisely experts in the field, data, facts, and then I can draw my conclusion after that. So there are ways in which we can get engaged. I think that the faith-based community in New Haven is recognizing this is something that we need to educate our members about and hear the stories also.
Indeed.
So I'll end with this. We know that the Just Say NO campaign was a joke and did more harm than good in the so-called war on drugs. But my call and my petition today is to just say KNOW. Just say no. We're saying that to the legislators. We're saying that to our communities. Before you do anything, say this with a bit of emotion here. You better know what you're getting into. You better know what doors you're opening up. You better know where this is leading. And it behooves all of us to get into the find out business before we change any laws.
Thank you, gentlemen. We have like another minute or so, not 90 seconds. So let's just take a pause. This is so I mentioned the term rich, and it is rich. And I mentioned rich not in terms of us becoming billionaires or Steve Jobs passed away. We're not even having all the wealth in the world. Although some people will say that if you know where your wealth comes from, you're very wealthy or already. Don't even have to think about it. So, but how can we seize on our community wealth and our community knowledge? And people often talk about community knowledge being power, but knowledge is also wealth. So just we want to maximize this wealth and not have it hidden from others. Even in terms of the cigarette industry, we know that the cigarette industry knew that it was addictive 40, 50, 60, 70, 80 years ago and kind of withheld that information from the general public. So we're at another precarious stage of whether we want to be addicted to falsehood, as you say, Pastor Todd, or addicted to truth. And let's choose truth to be the way.
Amen, preacher.
All right. Yeah. So
yo, Todd and Tom, if I can just add, just merely 500 feet from here. Last summer, we saw with our very eyes what happened with some say over 100 of our residents. And I remember in traveling the States, I felt that New Haven became somewhat the laughingstock when I heard clergy say, "What's going on in New Haven?" And my hope is that the generations that follow us, that we're not the laughingstock for them, but they say, you know what, you've approved under your watch legislation that legalize a substance that has devastated thousands and thousands of families in this state. We're hoping that doesn't.
Just quickly to that point, even if marijuana is legalized, the black market is not going anywhere. That's one of the key arguments in favor of legalization. They're going to get creative. They're going to give away drugs like they did on the green that day. They're going to find other ways to make money, but they're not going.
Because we'll have to have you guys back. That's all I can say. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Harry. Thank you, Paul Bass, for kind of having the creativity and innovation and kind of start the not only the New Haven Independent, but to secure the FCC license to have a low power station that you're listening to. Let's not take for granted things that we have, tools we have available here in our little old state, in our little old city of New Haven. And WNHH is becoming, really in my mind, a significant player in terms of community communication and justice and equality. Thank you. Talk to you guys soon.
Thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Keep on working, open curtains, haters swerving, cause they ain't ready for your final version. I'm never gonna give up, fall down, I just gotta get up, yeah. Cause this is my road, let's camera action, I'm ready to go. I'm never gonna give up, fall down, I just gotta get up, yeah. Yeah, this is my road, let's camera action, I'm ready to go.